Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. This is my first YouTube video, so I'm a little nervous, but this was requested that I do a voiceover, so why not? I'm doing a mermaid look with a neutral eye, kind of like my signature at this point, but I promise it's super easy, super fun, and just keep watching. Okay, so let's just get right into it. First, I want to apologize if you hear any noises in the back. I do live in the city, so trying to find quiet time is like nearly impossible. But anyway, I've already filled in my eyebrows and moisturized my skin off camera. What I'm doing now is just blending out the concealer that I applied on my lids. I like to use concealer as a base instead of primers for shadows for no real reason other than I just prefer concealer. I never really experimented with primers. Concealer just works best for me. Okay, so once the concealer is all blended out, using the Laura Mercier translucent powder with a fluffy brush. This fluffy brush is by Real Techniques. I like fluffy brushes for this part because it picks up just enough powder. It's not overdoing it, and it's just enough to really smooth out that concealer. So it's now time for eyeshadows. The eyeshadow palette that I'll be using is the Desi X Katie Friendcation palette for Dose of Colors. The first shade we're going to use is the shade Necessary. It's the middle shade on the top row using the Morphe M514 brush. For this look, I wanted a more rounded look. I don't want it too fanned out like I normally do. This look is actually a look that I found from I Love Sarai. So my look will be a little bit more beginner compared to hers, but it's ultimately the same look. So for our second shade, we'll be using the shade Churro. This shade is going to go directly onto the crease using a Morphe M433 brush. Now with this shade, you want to use a very light hand while also blending upwards into the shade Necessary, just so that the two colors meet and are very seamless on the lid. We don't want any harsh lines. Using the same brush I used for Churro, I'm going to go back in with Necessary and going to apply that on top of Churro just to make sure that everything is blended out, there's no harsh lines, and it looks so nicely diffused. Also making sure that the other side is just as blended out as the other lid. We want them both somewhat identical. Now I'll be using the shades Necessary and Basic for the lid, using a Morphe ME14 brush. It's more on the flat side, and it's just easier for me to blend the two colors together just to make sure it's nice and muted on the lid. I really love the way the two colors blend out. It's just like the perfect beigey tone for the lid. Now going in with the shade Chains, I'm using a Morphe R44 brush, and it's just basically a slanted flat eyeliner brush. Really, I'm just gonna use that shade to just start off with a kind of smoked out cat eye. Again, I'm really precise when it comes to my eyeliner, so I'm just here making sure that they both look somewhat even. Now using the KKW X Mario collab palette, I want to go in with the shade 2008 using a flat eyeliner brush. You can use any eyeliner brush of your preference, and I want to take that shade on top of Chains just to really intensify the colors together. Once using those two shades, I want to really smoke out the line because I don't want it to look too harsh. I just want it to look very smoky. So I'm using any tapered brush. The brush that I'm using doesn't have a number, but it is by Morphe. I think it's one of those set brushes, but any tapered brush will do just to smoke it out. Now using the NARS black eyeliner, I am just going to go over the cat eye that we just did just to really amplify the colors. I want to use a light hand because you don't want it too dark, because we're just going to go over with the brush right after this just to really smoke out the colors. I know I keep repeating smoke and smoky, but this is really just part of the process. I want it to just really blend well, and I don't want it to look so black on the upper lid. Notice how I'm being very cautious applying the black eyeliner onto the tip of the wing because I don't want to mess it up, and having to do it all over again would just be so time consuming. So I just want to put a little bit on the tip and then go in with our flat eyeliner brush to mix the color together, and that way it can look nice and diffuse on the outside of our lids. Once we're done with the eyeshadow, we're just gonna go in now and apply the mascara. This mascara is the Kush mascara by Milk Makeup, and this is like probably my top 5 favorite mascaras I've ever used. It doesn't really clump, and I just get the right amount on my lashes. For lashes, I'm just using House of Lashes Spellbound using the Duo Clear Glue. Now for our base, I'm just gonna be using the e.l.f. Primer Putty. A lot of people compare this to the Tatcha one. I've never used the Tatcha one, but this e.l.f. one is more than half of the price, and I'm all for saving some money. And I feel like this one just works just as fine for me. After applying the primer, I like to go in and just cover up any red spots that I have. I don't really break out, but I do get, some small red spots here and there. So I'm using the green corrector by LA Girl. Don't sleep on LA Girl because most of the times for like an everyday beat, I use their concealers. They're just so affordable, and for the price you pay, you get a lot of coverage. To blend, I'm just gonna first use my fingers before I use a beauty blender, just to make sure that everything is all evened out. I really don't want it to look messy under my foundation, or if anything to really go wrong, I don't want it to look so green under the foundation. So I'll go in my fingers and then with the beauty blender. So for foundation, I'm using the Giorgio Armani Illuminous Silk Foundation in the shade 6.0. I am mixing that with the NARS Illuminator in the shade Copacabana. I like to do this trick just so my skin looks more dewy, more glowy, more fresh. I don't really like my skin to look like it's just packed on with makeup. That's just my preference, not that there's anything wrong with that. The brush that I'm using is a Morphe M439 brush, and I'm doing this just to really buff out that foundation, making sure that it gets really deep into my skin. Now I'm just going in with a damp beauty blender. This one is by Real Techniques. It's my favorite beauty blender, and I'm just making sure that this foundation looks more smooth, looks more like skin. I like to do this for at least 5 minutes just so I can make sure that foundation is like penetrated into my skin. Now I will be applying my favorite concealer of all time. It's the Born This Way multi-purpose concealer. It's so creamy and it's just perfect for my skin type. The color that I'm going in with first is closer to my skin tone now because I am a little bit tanned compared to the winter. So I'm just using the shade Taffy first and then applying my winter concealer on top to really brighten up the eye, and this shade is Vanilla. Once your concealer is applied, I like to use this Pro Concealer brush in number 57 from Sephora. I really love this brush. I've had it for a couple years now. I like to blend out my concealer with this particular brush just for a more airbrush finish. And I like to bring in the excess concealer that's on the brush onto my frown lines just to really brighten up around my mouth. and also bringing the concealer down onto the sides of my nose for a better contour. Now going in with the damp beauty blender by Real Techniques. This one's a lot smaller, just so I can really get in my under eye, around my mouth, and on my chin, just to really smooth out that concealer. We don't want it to look too cakey, we want it to look like skin at the end of the day. So I'm just really smoothing out that concealer before we apply any powders. Now going back in with the Too Faced concealer, I'm using the shade Taffy, and I'm just bringing that color along the bridge of my nose while also being very cautious because I don't like to bring up concealer too above my eyebrows for the simple fact that a lot of product goes onto the forehead already between the foundation, the powder, and the cream contour. So I'm just going to be very cautious when I'm blending, and I don't want to bring up the product too high. Just enough to get some kind of, contrast between the bronzer and the concealer. As you all saw, I already had blended out that concealer in between my eyebrows. So now I'm going in with the Anastasia contour stick in the shade Mink. I'm bringing that shade in with just a regular, concealer brush that I have lying around, and I'm just bringing that color along the sides of my nose. When doing this, you want to make sure that it's not too far out because that'll just make your nose look wider, and in this case we just wanted to make it look smaller. So be careful with the placement. It should be measured like right on the crease of your eyelids down into your nose, if that helps you. But when applying this color, be very cautious because we don't want any harsh lines. I mean, we're going to blend it out with the beauty blender, but just to save you time, use a very light hand. You don't need that much product. Now going in with that damp beauty blender, we're just gonna blend out those colors. First starting out with the concealer, bringing it down, and then blending out the contour color. We want to make sure all the colors are blended into the skin. Just like we do regularly for foundation, we want this to look very natural. And if you use the light hand, like I told you, this shouldn't take too long to blend out. If you use a heavier hand, then you have to really be cautious with your blending, and it can get really messy. So it's really necessary for you to be careful when doing a contour on your nose. Once our nose contour is done, I am just going to slightly bake with the Laura Mercier translucent powder. I don't like to overly bake because I do have more of dry skin, and I like my under eye to look bright but not too bright. And I'm also going to bring in this powder along the sides of my nose. Now I am going to put that powder on top of the concealer that we applied earlier. Using the straight end of the beauty blender, this beauty blender has an edge to it, and it just comes in handy when I want to apply the powder along the sides of my nose and on the bridge of my nose. Now it's time to contour up our face. I will be using the same contour stick that we used earlier in the same shade by Anastasia. Only this time I'm mixing it with some argan oil just to really make sure that it's really creamy. This is going onto my face, so the creamier the better because it makes for an easier application and it makes for easier blending. So once the first step is done, we want to go and apply the cream contour onto our face. Using the Sephora slanted buffing detail brush, I actually bought this brush on sale at Sephora, and it's probably the best contour brush that I've used versus the one I was using before, because the one that I was using before obviously was on a cheaper scale. It got the job done, but compared to this one, my cream contour just looks so natural. And it really does the job for me. It's not very difficult to use. Okay, so for this step it's very crucial because we want to make sure that the cream contour goes above our natural cheekbone. And I like to do this because if you put it directly onto your natural cheekbone area, it can lead to a disaster, because if you blend it out with the beauty blender, you end up blending it out too down below your natural cheekbone area, and it ends up making your face look wider, and obviously we don't want that. So now, taking our damp beauty blender, I am just focusing right now on my forehead area. I want to bring the contour, you know, deeper into my hairline. I don't want to bring the contour down, because that'll just make my, you know, my forehead look bigger. And we all know I have a big forehead. I am aware. I want it to look more natural. I don't need my forehead to look big. So remember, I said you want to bring the cream contour above the cheekbone area. Now, if you noticed how easy it was for me to blend it all out, and how it just pretty much melted into my cheekbone, I didn't have to try. Now, if we would have done it directly onto the cheekbone, it would have been a mess, it would have been a disaster, and we would have had to start all over. So that is really the trick. Make sure to bring that contour right above the cheekbone. Now, using the Real Techniques brush that we used earlier, I am just dusting off the translucent powder and just really bringing it into the sides of my mouth, above my lip, on my chin, and dusting it off on my nose. Now, using the Airbrush Flawless Finish powder by Charlotte Tilbury, that was kind of a tongue twister, I am going to just put it on top of the translucent powder that we used earlier. A little bit goes a long way with this product. You don't need a lot. It's just so perfect. It makes my skin look just so airbrushed and flawless, hence the name. And you know, it was a bit pricey, but honestly, this powder is going to last me a really long time. Now, to really finish up our eyes, I'm going to go back in on my waterline with the NARS black eyeliner that we used earlier. And now we're just applying the same mascara we used earlier, the Kush Milk Makeup Mascara, and just applying it on our bottom lashes. And just be very cautious when doing this. You don't want it to end up going onto your concealer and your powders that you already applied. Now for my favorite part, I really love bronzer. I can't live without it. I love to look tanned. So I'll be using two bronzers. The first bronzer that I'm using is by Sephora. It's in the shade Fiji, and it's similar to the NARS Laguna one, except for the Sephora one, it's on the more shimmery side. So I like to use that one first because it is lighter also. And now, to intensify it, I am going in with the NARS Laguna bronzer, just to really darken up my face a little bit, using the Morphe M527 brush. For blush, I'm using the Fenty Beauty Killawat in the shades Ginger Binge and Moscow Mule, just using a stippling brush. This one is by Sonia Kashuk. I don't know if this had a specific number or not, because it's so old that it pretty much just wore off on my brush. And this color is just so pretty, so bright, so shimmery. I didn't like blush before up until this year, and now I really can't just stop using it. Now, to just hydrate my skin a little bit, I feel like it's a little dry. I'm just gonna spray some rose water spray and just let it dry out a little bit before we apply highlighter. Once my face is dry, I'm gonna go and use the Anastasia X Nicole highlighter kit. I will be using two shades. I am going to use the two gold shades, and the shades are called Glow Getter and 143. and just applying that right onto the cheekbone to make my cheekbones pop. And when doing this, I want to make sure that it blends nicely into the contour, and with the blush, I don't want it to look too packed on. I want it to look nice and seamless. Now I like a forehead highlight. I don't know about everyone else, but I just like to do this. I'm a little extra. And also I want to bring that highlight on the bridge of our nose, just for a more snatched nose. And to make my lips a little fuller than what they are, I like to put the highlight right on my cleft. Now it's time for the lips. I will be using the Carly Bible Il Maquillage collection, and to start I'll be going in with the lip liner in the shade Libra, and this has to be probably my favorite lip liner that I have right now. Not because it's named Libra, I know I'm a Libra, but just the formulation is so good. It's long wear and waterproof, and it's just a pretty color. I compared it to MAC's Cork lip liner, and they are similar in color, but I will say that Carly's, once it's dried down, it's more of a cool brown versus MAC's Cork. And to fill in, I don't really overline my lips too much. I don't really need it. I just like to go a little darker on the edges of my mouth, just for a more fuller, pouty effect. Now continuing on with our lips, I am using the lipstick shade Luna from the same collection, and this is just such a pretty nude, but I am a sucker for nudes. I will buy as many nudes as I please. It's just my thing. I don't care. And this formulation is just so good on the lips. It's a velvet matte, so it's nice and smooth, not too creamy where I have to find myself to reapply all the time. And the pigmentation is there because I used one swipe and it pretty much did the job for me. Now to finish off with the lips, I'm using the lip gloss from the collection in Stardust. It's not my favorite lip gloss, but I don't hate it. I like to start off in the center of my lips, then extending the color out, just for a more defined lip. Now to finish off our face, I am just using the Morphe Perfecting Spray Mist. It just smells so good, and it's just so light and airy on the face. Now that's complete. Oh, my face looks so good. Looks like skin. I don't look too cakey. It's just so perfect. So now we're on to hair. I originally had mermaid waves over the weekend, which is why my hair is still kind of intact. I had posted a selfie onto my Instagram story and just received a ton of DMs asking me how I achieved this look, and I figured, you know what, I'll just do a tutorial to teach you guys because it's just super easy. So once you're done combing out your hair, it's important to spritz your hair with some heat protectant. I'm using the one by Tresemme. I normally don't use heat tools on the regular because I have extremely curly hair. And I'm not trying to mess up my curl pattern. Once you section off your hair, I like to go back in with the comb just to make sure that there's just no knots. And I like to spray some dry texturizing spray before I use the curling iron. I like to use this spray versus hairspray because hairspray makes your hair hard, and I really want my waves to look and feel soft. Now this 3-barrel goes up to 400 degrees, I believe, and I'm using it on 185, so not too high. I don't want to burn off my ear. And as I'm going down, I like to hold the wand for 30 seconds. So as you saw, starting from the top, then sliding down into the middle and sliding down to the ends because I don't like my waves to look stringy at the bottom. So as you can see, I worked my way onto the top and doing the same pattern, combing out the hair, spraying heat protector, then going in with the Olive spray, and slowly bringing down that wand from the top, middle, and end. I didn't want to film the whole thing just because it's just a repeated process and I didn't want to bore you guys. So once I'm done with the wand, I like to spray a little bit more texturizer spray, and I don't really comb out my waves or really finger the waves out. I like to just give it a quick little shake, and the clips I'm using are by my peach. They're just cute and flirty. And that is it for this look. Super cute, super easy. I hope you all enjoyed. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button. Bye!